So good morning, everybody. Thank you all for being here. I'm Randy Riley of Golden Sun Insights. Some of you may remember that in the past I wore a retailer hat, most recently with the Kroger Company. And it's awfully awesome to see everybody here. And I think, putting COVID aside, isn't it nice to be at a trade show and seeing all the people you've missed?
Amen.
So awesome. So good to see all of you. So, we're here today to talk about obstacles and opportunities with organic produce in a post-COVID world. And I am surrounded with an expert panel of folks within the industry with me. So here today with us is Robbie Cruz, the Vice President of Produce at Target. Morning. Join me in welcoming him. Also, Vice President of Sales at Braga Fresh is Heather Fuller. And then the Chief Commercial Officer at Wholesome, Ricardo Crisantes. Yeah. So, just a quick bio. I know most of you know the three panelists, but I think it's appropriate just to talk about their past and their bio. Robbie has over 27 years of retail experience, which is awesome. He's got an extensive experience in the industry and is passionate about continuing to drive innovation at Target. A bit of a change where produce continues to play an integral role in their go-to-market strategy, both with food and beverage, and Target's suite of easy, convenient, same-day services. So it's great to have you, Robbie. You and I spoke on the phone yesterday, and Robbie's question was, it's been a couple years since he's been at OPS, and what can he expect? And my response to you is, I think you're going to be the prettiest girl at the ball. Being at Target. Heather Fuller has been focused on the organic channel of fresh produce for the last decade, working for family-owned farming companies. What's interesting about Heather is from her first job as a field inspector all the way through the buy and sell portions of the business, Heather has a deep understanding of the supply chain. So welcome, Heather.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
And then Ricardo Crisantes is an interesting character. He brings over 20 years of experience in sustainable organic agriculture, and he spearheads the marketing and sales efforts at Wholesome. He is the board chairman of Fair Trade USA, and he has worked to create a more organic and fair trade produce in the U.S. by educating retailers and consumers through amplifying the farm worker's voice, and we're real eager to hear a little bit about that, especially as it relates to our topic around the post-COVID world. So basically, these past 2 years, my hope is that you would agree that we have seen historic and epic times in our industry. The rise in business for grocery retailers, the rise in business for growers and shippers, all fueled by the COVID pandemic, has been interesting to be a part of, and I would argue challenging in many different ways from the way we went to market before. I would probably sum it up by saying there was a bit of chaos in our industry. If you think about it, at the beginning of COVID-19, we saw a dramatic decline in food service. As that was happening, naturally, we saw retailers experiencing massive growth where they saw historic and epic sales. A bit of time later, we saw that there was a bit of decline in that sales growth as there was a shift from the consumer moving from cooking meals at home back to food service. And as all that was happening, we just saw astronomical consumer behavior shifts. And that's what I'm interested in talking about today. We know that the consumer was shifting from eating out to making meals at home. We saw a dramatic rise in e-commerce, specifically delivery services. And while we're all becoming educated and experienced in that, we thought it'd be good to talk about that with this expert panel. So basically, our focus for the discussion today is to shed some light on what has happened in the last 2 years as it relates to COVID, and how the shift in retail and the shift in production can forecast the future of what we can expect in a post-COVID world. So some of the things we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about consumer behavior. Hopefully we'll touch on innovation. Hopefully we'll talk about how the companies respond to COVID, and hopefully we can have a little glimpse into the future. So, sound good?
Sounds
That's
great.
Okay, good. So let's kind of jump into it. Robbie, we talked a bit about consumer behavior, and as a retailer, I'd imagine you folks have a pretty good pulse on that. So just curious from a retailer's perspective, what changes in the consumer behavior did you notice, and what do you forecast that the future holds as it relates to those changes?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, food and bev is going to be a big priority for Target as we move forward. We were actually voted Retailer of the Year from Supermarket News this year, which was a great accomplishment for Target and the team that we had over there. And really, we saw the change in drive up and pickup was tremendous for us. The last year, we actually saw 270% lift in that drive up and pickup, and then we actually cycled that with 50% lifts into this year. And so we don't see that really changing. It's how do we continue to bring that surprise and delight to the guests when they shop at Target and provide those meal solutions. And so if you haven't done drive up or pickup at Target, it's a fantastic experience. We get it out to your car within 2 minutes. You could actually choose the door if you wanted to be in the trunk. And so we're continuing to look at each of our store formats and how we can expand that even quicker into the areas. And so a big focus for us as we move forward is how do we bring in that ease and value to the shopper as they come into Target, as they think about Target for all those special needs that they have.
And would you attribute a lot of that rise in e-commerce to convenience or the COVID factor, or maybe a combination of both?
Yeah, I mean, most families were eating at home, right? You had that. I think what COVID brought to us was it brought us to kind of slow down again, cook at home, have a family meal, where you're not in that hustle and bustle of driving around and being stuck in Southern California for 2 hours on the road there, right? So now you're able to spend that with your family, and you start to look at for different ways of recipes that you're using. I think when you think about when the pandemic first started, it was, okay, how do we cook some easy meals? And then, I mean, we've been here for almost 2 years now, so how do you continue to find an inspiration? And that's what we're trying to bring at Target, is inspire them for some different meals that you haven't had before and bring it in.
Awesome. Ricardo, same question. From a grower-shipper perspective, what changes did you see in consumer behavior?
Right, so on the supplier side, that demand to do pickups and click and collects, and it meant that there was a lot of demand for packaging for us. And if you guys remember back to 2019, some of the subjects were, hey, let's get plastic out of produce. So all of a sudden, we see a great demand for packaging that is friendly to this new channel of distribution. So now, after COVID, how do we square that circle, right? Like, how do we, look into organic produce that is heavily packaged? And, I think that, organic clearly serves the conscious consumer. And as the crisis slows down, as COVID gets normalized, we're going to go back to have to answer to that consumer with a responsible package. It does not need to be perfect in every sense, but it does need for us to show that we care about those values that those consumers aspire when they choose organic produce. So I think as we move forward, we're going to be asked, the grower community, to come up with packaging solutions that show responsibility, that are friendly to these new e-commerce distribution channels, and then answer to conscious consumers' concerns.
Yeah, very interesting. So, two big, massive themes: convenience, e-commerce, packaging, shifts in consumer behavior. Heather, did you see any specific product types or specific items that may have changed?
Definitely. We saw a big rise in the value-added portion of our business. So packaged salads, convenience veg, that really did rise significantly, and that portion of our business grew a lot. And I think in addition to that, on the commodity side, there was an increase in a request for wrapped packaging. So instead of a bunch broccoli, a wrapped broccoli instead. And it goes to 2 points. And one of the points, Ricardo, that you mentioned is the automated systems that are being used now for e-commerce. But also, there was the perception of safety factor and not having people touch your food. We've seen a definite rise on the packaged salads, and I think that will continue to be sustained. To Ricardo's point, though, it is starting to turn a little bit, and at Braga, we were mindful to keep our foot on the gas in terms of coming up with additional options for packaging with reduced plastics and recyclability. All of those things will continue to be important in the future, and we're starting to see those requests come back already. So it's kind of a dual situation there. And I would also say in terms of e-commerce, and Robbie, one of the things that you mentioned with your pickup and your drive-up portion of your business, we've spent a lot of time in the past year, and I'm sure many of you have as well, focusing our time and resources on improving our digital marketing capability, making sure that we're providing our retail partners with the best data, the best images, telling our story online. All of those things become so much more important with your promotional capabilities because you aren't having people walk in your store. And how do we do that moving forward? And how do we continue to increase our consumption overall in the digital space, which is an entirely different media?
Wow, yeah, no, very insightful, appreciate that. So, you know, every good leader often tries to look at current situations and learn from it, probably put some strategies into place on how to address it or respond to the situations at hand. So when I'm thinking of COVID-19 and the fluctuation in business, it's always good to kind of Monday morning quarterback it and look back and say, what will we have done differently, or what have we learned in order to progress forward in a positive manner? So, you know, Robbie, in hindsight, what is the best practice for retailers, knowing what you went through the last 2 years on how you can draft up a playbook moving forward?
Yeah, I think we all learned that we needed to stay nimble. I mean, it happened so fast, and the influx of sales that came in for everybody. How did we pivot and make some adjustments quickly? One thing that we added at Target was we added fresh food to our pickup, which we didn't have before COVID. And so we had to rally the troops, rally the team to be able to get it on the platform. And then it starts to come in and you think about what happens with frozen. How do we keep it frozen? How do we keep it refrigerated for that customer and still get it out to the car within 2 minutes? And so that was a big change for us as we moved forward. And now we're really re-looking at our formats and our stores and adding that refrigeration that's close for us to be able to deliver that. And so the biggest thing for us was staying nimble. How do we get it onto our digital platform quickly, and how we're providing those meal solutions to our guests on that platform? Those were some of the things that we would probably look at as we move forward, and the agility to make it happen quickly.
Sure. So, you know, I hear nimble and flexibility. I know that sometimes between retailers and suppliers, there's a bit of apprehension in that. Mm-hmm. So, Heather, hearing what Robbie just said, what's your initial reaction to that?
Well, here are a couple things. Number one, we need to focus on our planning and future planning together. So as growers, we have a tendency to look at our own planning, our production planning, what our sales plan is going to be. I think moving forward, we learned we really need to stay connected with our trading partners so that we understand what their goals are, and so that we can be nimble and flexible and agile and deal with overproduction situations, and how do we communicate our cost pressures and stable pricing together. And there was a lot of chaos, to your point, in the industry before. Forecasting became very difficult, to say the least. But I think as we learned going through the pandemic, forecasting is super important, and the only way that we can get there is to really deepen those relationships with our partners, to understand what the challenges are on both sides, and to plan moving forward, and to invest in the technology to do that.
Yeah, very insightful, thanks. So, you know, Robbie, in your bio, we talked about how active you are in fair trade. And so when I think about response to COVID, I'm just real curious about how that affected the whole fair trade. And when you think about fair trade, you're thinking about amplifying the farm worker's voice. What were your experiences like a couple years?
Right. So, the fair trade certification and the fair trade movement, I would say, is about, bringing equity to the supply chain and, farm workers, being recognized as valuable. I think during COVID, there was a moment of clarity. We said, there's critical infrastructure in the United States, and food workers and farm workers are part of that critical infrastructure. We asked our farm workers to continue working during a time when risks were still really unknown, right? And we were saying, thank you to our, food delivery personnel. We're saying thank you to our farm workers. So if we have that clarity that, farm workers are critical and we depend on them showing up every day for our next meal, I don't want to lose that clarity. I don't want to lose that moment. And actually, I want to amplify it. And I think that one of the best ways to recognize that effort is embracing the fair trade model, purchasing fair trade products that really kind of bring equity to the supply chain, that really recognize and honor that work that we depend on critically.
Interesting. We can have a whole hour discussion around that very topic, and maybe we can look forward to something like that, but interesting. One of the biggest things that I heard in the last 2 years was this notion around innovation. And an example of that is there was this guy at one of the nation's largest retailers that thought it'd be a really good idea to discontinue a whole bunch of slow-moving items and cut out innovation in order to serve the customer's needs during the height of COVID. And so my understanding is some of that still exists. And so when we think about a post-COVID world as it relates to innovation, just want to have a discussion on that. And so some think that out of necessity, Robbie, comes innovation. And so I'm curious, how has the pandemic impacted Target's ability to be innovative?
Yeah, and it all starts with quality, right? And that best at-home eating experience. I've probably talked to many of you about that. And every time you talk to me, I probably say the exact same thing, but it really is that, right? We want to, when you think about that guest who'd be able to take home and they're cooking for their family, it has to be that best at-home eating experience. And then as we continue to work together on packaging and plant-based type items, like we just rolled out our Good and Gather dressings and dips that are out there that are plant-based. And then we got to work on what is the next it item. You have to keep it fun. You have to, and that's what really drives Target. If you think about our total store, on what we're doing with our home, what we work with on Disney, what we're working with Apple, how do we bring that it item into produce and drive it through, if it's sampling or whatever it may be, but it has to be that at-home eating experience. And we have to continue to look at what Ricardo talked about on packaging. It's when we first started, everyone said, put all the packaging back in. And then, and now we have to think about what are we going to do as we move forward to go back to what our goals were before this pandemic, and how do we take that plastic out of the industry?
Yeah, it's a good point. So let's go back to that, Ricardo. You made a pretty important point that I think is resonating in all of our minds. Get rid of plastic, bring plastic back. Now we're in a state of possibly getting rid of plastic. Can you expand a little bit more on that?
When I said responsible solutions, I think that, this conscious consumer, this consumer that, buys from brands, from companies that have values that resonate with them, that they want to be their purchases part of the solution to the climate crisis, to the inequality that we see, right? This consumer understand that there is a price to be paid. That's why the organic industry has been able to sustain itself, even when, back in the day our quality wasn't the best, right? That consumer was there for us, and, through this history in the organic industry was willing to pay more. I believe that this consumer is willing to pay more for responsibility. Like the easy solutions are not the ones they're looking for. I understand it's a contradiction. Is more packaging, but everything sustainable. Like, your head wants to just, you know, you can't really kind of put that together. But I think the companies that figure this out, the companies that show that responsibility, yes, we're not going to have a perfect solution, but we're going to strive for it, and we're going to continue on that path, and we're going to continue getting better, and we're going to bring in innovation into packaging, and we're going to look at the best data that is out there. I think the companies that go on that journey will be rewarded by this consumer that very much backs up the organic purchases.
Interesting. Along those same lines, when we talk about innovation, Heather, earlier you mentioned during COVID, you saw a rise in packaged salads, convenience. And I think about your company and how innovative they've been in the assortment piece with value-added salads. So how has that been in the last year and a half? You met any resistance, and what's your plan moving forward?
Well, I think there were some challenges, of course, through the pandemic, and I think everyone in their immediate focus was keeping product on the shelf, right, and making sure that we had that stable supply chain, that we could keep what we had in the store already supplied and on the shelf. But at the same time, especially in packaged salad category and specifically in the organic space, we need to continue to focus on innovation. And in our internal discussions, the most important thing we think in terms of innovation, it all has to come back to flavor. We have to have that it. We have to look for that it item, right? And for the organic consumer, they're a little bit different than the conventional consumer. They're looking for some different things. You mentioned plant-based, which is very important, making sure we meet all of those dietary needs, but everything does come back to flavor. So we have to really focus on the innovation there. The piece in terms of packaging is a little bit more challenging when it comes to salads and film, but it's important to communicate our story on what we want to do, talk about recyclability, add those in-pack, on-pack stories that show the consumer that we're focused on sustainability, we're focused on innovation in terms of recipes and flavor and variety, and offering some different things in the organic space that haven't been found in the past. So it was a little bit of a challenge in the pandemic, dealing with the supply chain, but I think the successful companies will remain focused on adding to their variety. It's important. It's important for the space.
Great. So, we've got a pretty big crowd here, and I'm imagining that all of them are looking at you three experts to look into your crystal ball and kind of forecast out the future on what we can expect, hopefully, as we exit out of a COVID world, hopefully. So, Robbie, earlier you talked about e-commerce, and so we're really curious about that. Is it a fad? Well, what do you expect? What kind of growth are you seeing?
It's not a fad. It's here to stay. And I talked about that growth that we had, right? We 270% last year, 55% this year. It's not going to slow down. We actually just added adult beverage out there to 1,200 stores where we're delivering adult beverages now, and then we're actually going to add on the remaining 800 stores later on this year. And so we're continuing to invest in that. We're continuing to look at our store formats on how do we expand what that looks like. When you think about just all the drive-up spots, how close is that actually to the door, where you're not, as the guests who are going to be shopping in the stores, we don't want them to have to walk blocks away to be able to come in. So we're continuing to invest in it. We're looking at how do we bring those meal solutions to the digital platform so that the guests can come and pick it up before that click and collect.
Yeah. I want to peel that back a little bit. I've heard from the grower shipper community, specifically some categories, that they're noticing and fearful that impulse purchasing is being negatively affected by the rise of e-commerce. Do you feel the same, or?
No, I think as an industry, we have to relook at the way we go to business versus just always looking at it from, being in-store shopping. How do we look at that digital platform and change the way that we've gotten to business over the last couple of years? Because we're going to have to make those pivots, and we have to work on it together, right? We can't be working on it siloed. And when I think about from the grower side of the business and the retailer side of the business, sometimes we go about it siloed versus working together on what that solution looks like. And I think that's the opportunity we have as an industry is let's be open and honest and work with each other on what that looks like as we move forward.
Great. Yeah. Yeah, I remember building the big displays and pilot high and watch it fly. Someone's going to bump into it and pick some up. We just have to figure out how to do that. Yeah, is what I'm hearing you say. So, Heather, we talked a little bit about in your bio how you're an expert on the food supply chain. And the buzz, it seems to be going on right now, is this resilient food supply chain, especially in a COVID and post-COVID world. Do you have a perspective on that you'd love to share?
Yeah, I mean, I think, building a resilient food supply chain, I think all of us know that that is built on responsiveness and agility, right? We talked a little bit about that before. Our industry in general is innately volatile, and we're experts at being flexible and changing plans and going to plan B. We know this already, but I think we really need to focus in building that in two ways. And one, I think, is improving the communication with our trading partners, with our retailers and our food service partners. And what I mean by that is really going deep in aligning our goals. So talking about what the future plans are, having real discussions about volume and commitments that are so important to the grower community in terms of building our programs, but also having discussions around cost pressure and price stability, and what are the challenges in retail, and what are those challenges in the growing community, and working together closely to really come up with the best plan for the consumer so that we can go to market with the best programs for the consumer. And I really believe in building that resilient supply chain. That's the key. We really need to understand what those goals are and to work closely together to get to that end point. The other part of that, of course, is production, right? Is really investing and planning on the production side, investing in our different growing areas and geographic diversity, in setting up redundancies in our processes, and really investing in our people, first and foremost, right? Your labor force is very important, and especially in COVID became even more important. So really investing in that on the production side will help us maintain that steady supply, and that's the start of everything.
Yeah, no, I would agree on the people comment, which is interesting because, when you have a significantly large workforce, I'd imagine communication is essential
Absolutely.
to the progress of it. So, Ricardo, do you have a point of view on that?
Let me just say something about the e-commerce piece as a grower shipper. I agree with Robbie. It's not a fad, and some of the challenges that we see from that moving forward is that before as a grower shipper, you feel kind of buried in that supply chain. The consumer is a couple of steps removed from you. All of a sudden, that e-commerce, it's bringing the consumer right into our doorstep, right? Like their concerns, you're going to hear the good reviews, you're going to hear the bad reviews. They're going to post pictures of your products, and they're going to tell you right into your face, right? That all of a sudden made us feel like we were not ready to receive that and how to really react that. And you can't just leave that out there. You have to be proactive about it. So as growers of organic produce, we need to engage with that. That's also an opportunity. Some of the merchandising tactics that we talked about, like that used to work in the past, I think that they're still going to be valid, but we're going to need to also learn to engage this consumer that I've been talking about, this conscious consumer that I've been talking about in a new way, because before we were like 3-4 steps behind, buried in that supply chain. So, I mean, that's I feel for us, grower shippers moving forward. I think that will be a challenge for us.
Yeah, so I want to ask you, I found it interesting what you said about your joke around feedback, right? You're getting feedback from consumers, and feedback's a gift. Did you run into some situations in the past couple of years that you'd like to share?
It's a gift, Ricardo. It's a gift.
On what you learned that you could make some progress on?
No, for sure. I mean, I think that, we're super proud of everything we grow, and, we, strive for great quality, and we think that, everything we sent out it's going to make U.S. #1 inspection anywhere it goes, right? And when you get consumers talking to you, not just about the color of your tomatoes, the color of the vine of the tomatoes, and how the packaging did not seal properly in the corner, like that's another level of scrutiny I was not ready for. So yeah, my ego is being a little battered.
Yeah, that's funny. Robbie, along those lines, I feel your pain as an ex-retailer. We come to these trade shows as retailers, and we talk a lot about the supply chain. We talk a lot about the farm worker. We talk about all those things. Speak to us about the consumer. So specifically, in the last year and a half, what did you see that you can clearly forecast will sustain in the future?
Yeah, the meal solutions isn't going to go away. But back to Ricardo's point on packaging, it's not going to happen overnight, right? And we have goals at Target. By 2025, we're going to cut out 25% of virgin plastic in all of our own brands. Well, 2025, you could say that sounds like a long ways away, but when you think about the machinery that you guys have to be able to put in and thinking about the solutions on shelf, what it looks like for the guest, how do we make sure that we're continuing to push on that quality perception that we have out there? We have to partner early on. And so we have to start talking about that now for us to be able to hit our goals that's going to happen in 2025. So I think brainstorming together on those meal solutions or how we bring that product back to the guest is how we're both going to win in the future.
Yeah, very well, thanks. So Ricardo, we talked about communication being super important, especially to the farm worker. Speak to us about how to leverage communication tools to maintain a direct line to your workforce.
Right, so, I'm out here promoting, how to honor these, farm workers and how to, really kind of bring equity to the supply chain. And, communication, goes both ways. Our company, through the fair trade standards, we're trying to kind of, build that farm worker voice in our company and hear it, the good and the bad. And, we invested in a system that lets us communicate via text with our farm workers. We have 3 farms in 2 countries and 3 different states, and it's 1,600 people that we hear and get feedback from. So we put out, surveys. We also, they can also go directly to HR to air grievances, and I think that makes us more accountable to them. And I would say during the pandemic, having built that infrastructure to communicate bi-directional, right? Like not just push information to them, here's trainings, here's some rules to follow, but also getting feedback, right? It's not just all, from top down, but you are also gonna get that gift of feedback, right? So during the pandemic, when the information was, the science was changing. I mean, we're all wearing masks now, but in the beginning of the pandemic, it was all about like washing your hands, right? And then the science started to evolve, and we needed to communicate that. And we were, I would say, blessed to have built this communication tool before it that was trusted, that people were used to it, that people knew how to use. And we were able to communicate really fast and even explain some, differences of why we're not requiring masks and what are the benefits of vaccines, and then get questions answered, from our workforce. So, certainly, you're also going to get, some feedback that needs to be handled by professionals. But if you close your eyes to that feedback, it will be at your own peril.
Yeah, interesting. So follow-up question to that is there an opportunity for a larger sustainability impact because of that?
I keep coming back to this conscious consumer. I keep coming back to, they're the ones that have carried the organic produce industry. I keep thinking about, that they, keep showing up for us, for the organic farmers, by actually, voting with their dollars, right? So, that support, organic produce has a great opportunity because it has the support of the conscious consumer. The conscious consumer is choosing organic, and organic consumers are 3 times more likely to purchase fair trade items. Roughly half of fair trade consumers look for other sustainability claims in it. So, you gotta think about yourself of why are we involved in the organic industry? Like, really communicate that why, that passion, if you're a family business, and you're passionate about the food you grow, you're passionate about doing it organically, and you're challenged by it, right? Like, organic farming is certainly not for the faint of heart, right? Be honest and open about that. And I would also venture out to say that, companies that want to team up, to make a bigger sustainability impact, look at the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals. That is a worldwide effort that any company can raise its hand and chip in 17 different goals that they have. So I think, as a brand, as a company that farms, you're not alone in this struggle. You can become part of a bigger movement that is resonating with a consumer that is ready to reward you, but you have to be very vocal about that and learn all these new tricks about communicating that us growers, even 2 years we felt so removed from that. I mean, the best I got was an email if somebody, once in a while tried my tomatoes, found my, info at wh.farm and sent me an email. That's about it. Now I get, likes and all the time, and 1 stars too, right?
Okay, so our time is limited. So Robbie, you're the retailer in the room. Give us a sneak peek as it relates to organics in a post-COVID world.
Yeah, the great thing about this show is organics is going to continue to grow. It's going to continue to be one of our priorities to bring in, and how do we look at bringing that new assortment or that it item, right? And so as we think about what we're doing with packaging and that level of transparency that we can have with each other on what's working, what's not, and how do we get all that messaging on the packaging without covering it up, right? And the consumer wants to see that product. So we're going to continue to push organics at Target. It's going to be a big goal for us as we move forward. Continue to find different ways that we're going to be able to speak to the guests. That's not necessarily shopping within our stores, but is maybe shopping from their phone or shopping from home. And so we have to work together on what that looks like in the future, and continue to drive that surprise and delight experience when you're shopping with us.
Excellent. So maybe just open it up to anybody in the room, see if they have a question for any of our wonderful panelists. We have a few minutes left.
For Ricardo.
All right, good morning. So this is for any of you, but especially Robbie. But I want to hear, it affects all of you. So plastic, we just talked a lot about it. But one thing so I love when I go to Target, I can buy deodorant in a cardboard tube. That's awesome. But where's the also thought process if the cardboard processes that we do as an industry take even more energy and more water than a plastic bag would? So the story isn't just remove plastic. It's all about the energy and the water. And how do we continue to evolve with that and tell the story? And maybe is just removing plastic not just the solution? It's not really a question, but if you have comments around that.
Man, I'll speak to it. So I think, when we think about the sustainability of the packaging, you're right. It's not just about removing plastic, but is it compostable? Is it biodegradable? And I really think about how we get that message to the guest. That is the biggest piece that we really have to help them with, is understand what we're trying to do as an industry. You have a very limited time when that guest is shopping with us, and to have that on shelf. And so I think we have to be open about what our goals are total as a company and how we bring that to life, and listen to the consumer. And what are they telling us to? Ricardo's point on his 1-star versus 5-star, right? Are we making adjustments and pivoting as we're listening to the guest? And I think that's probably our biggest opportunity, is listen to what they're telling us, and then work together on how we do that from a grower side of the business and a retailer side of the business. Yeah.
I mean, sustainability is messy, right? You get in there and you get to the details, and sometimes plastic is the right choice. You're right. Sometimes cardboard can not be the most responsible solution. So, welcome to sustainability, and welcome to no clear answer. The pressure is on for us. People want to see the product. People actually like to see tomatoes. They like to turn them around. They like to see, celery hearts and, broccoli, right? They don't like to see just logos. How do we, come with a solution? That's why I'm talking about responsible packaging. I mean, a truly sustainable packaging would be don't package it, right?
Right.
That would be it, right? But we are challenged because, the preference is for these solutions that are e-commerce, and this is the distribution channel that it is. I'm talking about responsibility. I'm about making the best choice you can. But it's so funny when I talk to my suppliers and they say, "Oh my God, nobody ever asked us that," right? So if we are not the grower community going back to our cardboard companies and asking them, where do you source this paper? If we don't ask that question, if only a few folks actually just care about where, how was the forest managed to get that, we're never going to get to that best solution. But it's by all of us keeping the pressure on to get to a better packaging, a more responsible solution, and obviously telling that story, which is complex. Like I say, welcome to complexity. I wish I would have an easy answer. There is no perfect packaging, right?
Well, I think we also need to become better storytellers as an industry, right? We have the best story to tell. We sell fresh produce. We sell medicine for your life, right? But as an industry, I think we haven't been the best storytellers. And I think an opportunity as e-commerce has taken a rise is using that digital space to tell our story. And we have to come up with better ideas to do that. It's maybe not always on pack. To your point, having a messy pack. Maybe it's not always messaging on pack, but maybe there's a way to do messaging, not just in social media, but in the data that you share with the retailer that pops up when your item pops up. I mean, there's ways that we, I think as a community, could deal with packaging in a different way and tell that story a little bit more effectively that I think we haven't in the past.
Excellent. Excellent. Any other questions?
I'm Daniela, and this question is mainly for Robbie and Heather. Talking about COVID impacts, I think something we've all dealt with is supply chain issues, increasing costs. Cardboard went up like 20% plus, lumber, pallets, workforce, everything. Heather, you spoke about working with retailers and communicating and talking about those cost pressures. Robbie, how do you communicate that to consumers? Because obviously that leads to increase in costs, not just organic, but across the board, but knowing that retailers are working on closing the gap between prices of organic and conventional. How do you communicate those types of pressures directly to the consumer?
Yeah, I think we have an opportunity to look at the total efficiency of that supply chain, right? How do we work together to making sure that we're maximizing out them trucks and making sure that we're getting that product as fast as we can into our FDCs and into our stores, and then making sure that we're delivering on, again, that best at-home eating experience. And so if we're delivering on that, the guest is going to be a little more lenient for us on making sure that we're giving them what they're looking for in that. And so what we've done is we literally have looked from the first mile to the last mile and dug in as a team and seen where is it at in the state, how are we bringing it in, can we do it more efficiently, can we work with grower partners on maybe consolidating somewhere else in the country so that we're taking out every cost possible there. And I don't see the trucking getting any easier as we move forward. So how do we look at that together and really find different solutions that maybe we haven't thought of before?
Yeah. Okay, so I'm getting this from the back, and I get it. But speaking on behalf of everybody, Heather, Robbie, Ricardo, we appreciate your time. It was a great discussion, learned a lot, and look forward to partnering with you all in the future.
Thank you.
Thanks, Randy.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.